Okay, so you want to get up to speed fast on a complicated topic. We get it.
Yeah, lots of noise out there.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into the history of U.S. tariffs. We've gone through a whole stack of sources, historical stuff, economic analyses, even writings from key people.
And the mission is simple. Cut through it all and pull out the really important insights, maybe some surprising facts, about how U.S. tariffs have worked, how they've changed, and their impact.
We'll touch on revenue, protectionism, and figures like Peter Navarro, too, all tailored for a clear understanding.
Right. So where do we start? Early days?
Let's do it. It's kind of wild to think about now, but from 1789 way into the early 20th century, tariffs were basically the money source for the federal government.
The very first Tariff Act, 1789, set rates around, what, 5%?
Yeah, about 5%. And it wasn't just about money. It actually led to the creation of the Revenue Cutter Service, the precursor to the Coast Guard.
And that revenue role was huge. At their peak, tariffs made up something like 95% of all federal income. The average rate was maybe 20% initially, but it fluctuated quite a bit.
95%, just imagine.
It's hard to, yeah. And the economist Douglas Irwin, he breaks down the early goals pretty neatly. 1, revenue, obviously. 2, protection for American industries. And 3, reciprocity.
Reciprocity, like using our tariffs as leverage.
Exactly, to sort of encourage other countries to lower their tariffs on our goods.
Okay, so revenue kings for over a century. Did anything challenge that?
Well, the Civil War brought in excise taxes temporarily, but tariffs stayed really important, still over 30% of revenue as late as 1915.
But the big game changer was the 16th Amendment, right?
Yeah.
1913.
That's the one. Income tax.
Yeah.
That really marked the beginning of the end for tariffs as the main source of government funds.
So besides money, there was this whole infant industry idea. Hamilton.
Right. Alexander Hamilton was a big proponent. He argued we needed tariffs, maybe even subsidies, to shield America's brand new industries from especially British competition.
It was part of that bigger American system idea for economic development.
Exactly. And the War of 1812 actually gave that a boost, unintentionally.
How so?
Well, it cut off European imports, forcing American manufacturing to sort of step up.
Ah, right. Which leads to the Tariff of 1816. The Dallas Tariff.
Precisely. That's often seen as the first explicitly protectionist tariff. Rates went up to around 35%, even 40% on things like cotton, wool, iron. Henry Clay was pushing it.
But it wasn't smooth sailing. You mentioned the Panic of 1819 earlier.
No, it faced problems. Loose credit, a flood of European goods after the war. It contributed to that economic downturn. The Panic of 1819 shows the complexity.
So looking back, were any of these tariffs actually, good for the economy?
It's debated, of course, but you could argue those post-war of 1812 tariffs, like 1816, did help. They gave industries like cotton and iron breathing room against cheaper imports, and they seem to have public backing.
What about during the Civil War? The moral tariff?
That one served multiple purposes. Yes, revenue for the Union war effort was critical, but it also protected northern industries and helped fund things like railroad expansion. The Republicans were pretty strongly protectionist then.
Okay, then there's the McKinley Tariff of 1890. That one sounds more controversial.
It is. Rates jumped to nearly 50%. Supporters, including Trump much later, pointed to its success in protecting industries like tin plate.
But the downside?
Higher prices for consumers, definitely. And some economists argue it contributed to the pretty severe Panic of 1893, so maybe not purely beneficial.
Let's flip to the ones that most agree were harmful. The Tariff of Abominations.
1828, yeah. That one lived up to its name, especially for the South. Their agrarian economy relied on imports, and they feared Britain would retaliate against their cotton exports.
Led to the nullification crisis, didn't it? A major political fight.
It absolutely did. Then you have the Black Tariff of 1842.
I'll take away.
It basically reversed some earlier tariff reductions, pushing rates back up near 40%. The result was pretty immediate, and negative imports fell by almost half. Exports dropped 20% in just 1 year.
Wow. So they repealed that one quickly.
Yeah, by 1846, the damage was pretty clear.
And then the big one everyone knows, Smoot-Hawley, 1930.
Right in the midst of the Great Depression, they slapped massive tariffs on like 20,000 different goods.
And the world reacted how you'd expect.
Retaliation across the board. Global trade is estimated to have fallen by 2/3. It's almost universally seen as making the Depression much, much worse.
Even recent history has examples like the 2002 steel tariffs.
Yeah, the Bush administration put tariffs of 8% to 30% on steel. The idea was to help U.S. steelmakers.
Right.
But studies showed it likely cost far more jobs in industries that use steel, maybe 200,000 jobs lost, than it saved in the steel industry itself. Plus, international backlash and a WTO ruling against it led to its repeal in 2003.
So back to the revenue shift. After the 16th Amendment, tariffs just faded as a budget source.
Dramatically. From 50–90% before 1913, they've rarely topped 2% since the mid-1930s. Recently, something like $77 billion sounds like a lot, but it was only about 1.5%, maybe 1.6% of total federal revenue.
Which brings us closer to today, and figures like Peter Navarro.
Right. Navarro, particularly in his book Death by China, painted China as this major economic threat. He focused on unfair practices, currency manipulation, intellectual property theft, subsidies.
And he saw tariffs as the weapon to fight back.
Very much so. He argued the trade deficit wasn't natural. It was proof of China cheating, essentially. His whole America First stance really aligned with the Trump administration's thinking.
And Trump appointed him to key trade roles.
Yeah, National Trade Council, Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy. He was influential.
So the Trump administration's tariffs, especially on China, the justification was fighting those unfair practices, the IP theft, the trade deficit. Trump even talked about Liberation Day from these deals.
That was the argument. Reciprocal tariffs were also floated, matching other countries' tariffs, though internally there was disagreement. People like Elon Musk raised concerns.
What was the actual economic fallout from those China tariffs?
Well, it's complex, but many analyses point to increased costs for American consumers and businesses because imports got more expensive.
And retaliation.
Oh, yeah. China hit back hard, especially on U.S. agriculture, which hurt farmers significantly. Global supply chains got disrupted. There were widespread concerns about it reducing GDP growth and costing jobs overall. Financial markets definitely got jumpy.
So, wrapping this up, the history of U.S. tariffs isn't simple, is it?
Not at all. It's this long story intertwining revenue needs, attempts, sometimes successful, sometimes not, to protect industries, and some pretty clear instances of causing major economic harm.
And the recent return to using tariffs more aggressively just shows that debate is far from over.
Absolutely. Which leaves us with a final thought, perhaps. Given this whole complex history and how much the global economy has changed, what are the absolutely critical things policymakers and maybe all of us need to weigh when considering tariffs today? What are the hidden consequences we might miss if we only focus on the immediate goals?